Hello and thank you. This was my first out-of-state book signing, so this is a milestone in my life as a new author, and it's been spectacular. And today, I have this rifle here. It's been signed by over 200 World War II veterans, this M1 Grand here. And today I got to add 7 of your local World War II veterans, including 2 female veterans, which are hard to come by. So this is awesome. I think I have now like 207 names on here. So you guys and girls will be mentioned in my 3rd edition of my book at the end, where everyone who signed the rifle. So I guess what I'll do is I'm going to play a short clip to explain why I used a rifle to get inside the brain of so many World War II veterans to write a best-selling book in the year 2021, technically. Writing about World War II is becoming harder and harder because, why? We don't have the people there to tell us the stories anymore. Pretty soon, writing about World War II is going to be no different than writing about the Revolution or the Civil War, because you guys and girls will not be there, or someone will not be there to explain what happened. That's why I wanted to do what I could to get this book out there to so many young generations of kids. I was telling someone earlier, one of the World War II veterans made a comment, and he's not far off, that a lot of today's youth doesn't know about the war, and that is true. But I wanted to give them hope, and you guys hope, that I can't tell you how many 15-year-olds have purchased my book, or have told their parents email me and say, my kid follows you on Instagram and on Facebook. He just wants a book, The Rifle, signed by you and as many World War II veterans as possible. So I'm telling you right now, your stories and legacy will not be forgotten. Hello, okay. I'm going to play a short clip. When I was going from veteran to veteran, there was one thing I noticed about these 200 World War II veterans, was how many of them had never returned to the battlefields they fought on. And we're talking, these are first world countries like France and Italy. And a lot of the reasons was a lot of these veterans didn't want to relive what they went through, but I was able to successfully convince veterans to come back with me 75 years later. And one of them was Al Bucciarelli, who had his leg blown off at the Battle of Monte Cassino.
So coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan was, it was great to be home and all, but what really helped me spark the rifle project was passing this sign every day. This is Andrew Biggio Square, and the first thing they'll think is, if people know me, they'll say, hey, that's your square, because my name is also Andrew Biggio. The problem is, it's not my square. It was my grandfather's brother who was killed in action in World War II at the age of 19. And every day, as a combat veteran myself, passing this sign, I decided to take it upon myself and find out what happened to the first Andrew Biggio on that hill in Italy. Andrew Biggio, the one we were just talking about, who was killed in action, he was the last time he hugged his family, hugged his father right on his front porch right here. It's also the same porch that I left from as well. So it was kind of an uneasy feeling knowing that the last Andrew Biggio to go to war didn't come home, and luckily I was fortunate enough to be able to. When I was reading Andrew's letters that he wrote home before he was killed in Italy, I found one particular letter on how much he enjoyed this rifle, the M1 Grand. And for me, as an infantryman myself in the Marine Corps, it connected me right to this long-lost relative. I said, I want to go out and purchase an M1 Grand, have it in the family. This is the rifle that he carried when he died. And I went out and bought an M1 Grand. I came back to this house, I'm waving it around my room, I'm looking in the mirror with it, and then I said, okay, that's great, now what? I said to myself, well, who can I show this rifle to? And then I said, my neighbor Joe Drago, was in the Battle of Okinawa. He was a Marine in the battle, one of the worst battles of World War II. So I went and knocked on his door, and at this time, at the age of his life, he was 92, and he was pretty much bound to his recliner. You know, his legs had atrophied, he was weak and old, you know. And as soon as I put this rifle in his hands, he had this burst of energy. He started waving the rifle around, smile from ear to ear. Oh my God, I haven't held one of these in so long, and ha ha, and he laughed, and I had to move out of the way because he's swinging this rifle around. He started telling me all these stories about the Battle of Okinawa. And I said, wow, like I have something special here. And I said, I want to remember this forever, sign your name on this rifle, Joe. And he refused to do it and until I finally talked him into it, and he signed right there, Joe Drago, I Company, 3rd Battalion, 22nd Marines, Battle of Okinawa. I made it a mission, you call it therapy, you call it research, call it what have you, of meeting these men that we've been reading about our whole lives, and these are the men why most of us had joined the military. World War II, jumping into Normandy, the Battle of the Bulge, the flag raising on Iwo Jima. Today's veterans literally live in the shadows of these men, and I took it upon myself to go see each one and interview them and learn how to live a successful life after combat. This rifle is signed by approximately 93 World War II veterans. About 30 of them on this have already passed away. This project was started in 2017, and it was my way of the youngest generation of veterans saying goodbye to the oldest generation of veterans, which is our World War II veterans. The VA says there's less than 300,000 World War II veterans still alive of the 16 million who served during World War II. If you look here on the inside of the upper receiver is the name of Albert Bucciarelli. Albert served with the 3rd Infantry Division during World War II. If you're familiar with the 3rd Infantry Division, they invaded Anzio, and they were also in the Battle of Monte Cassino, Italy, fighting some of Hitler's best German troops. Well, Albert, at age 19, was laying wire down, and an artillery shell landed in front of him, killed his sergeant, and blew off Albert's leg. Albert, he didn't want to go home from the war after that. He was laying there with one leg in Italy, and he told the nurses, told the doctors, I don't want to go home. He was very embarrassed, ashamed that he was going to be named for the rest of his life. And unfortunately, it wasn't his choice, but naturally the Army would eventually send him home. Today he's 94 years old. He's never been back to Italy, even with his family wanting to go on vacation in the 70s and the 80s to Italy as a vacation. He still refused to go. I believe they still went without him. He has avoided veterans organizations, groups, reunions his entire life until now. I spoke with his family, and I thought the best way to surprise him with a trip back to Italy would be at my annual event, the Boston's Wounded Vet Run. Boston's Wounded Vet Run, also known as BigFought.com, is geared to severely wounded veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. It started 9 years ago with a small motorcycle charity ride to help a soldier get a new roof on his house and part of a new walkway, and it just spawned into helping over hundreds of wounded veterans with all sorts of needs, and also building them a family in the biker community who looks after them, and now they all take part in our events all over the country with us. We gave them a new hobby, new motivation, and just new people to look over them while they're living life with the injuries that they'll have to be dealing with the rest of their life. We brought him on stage and we announced that he, his stepdaughter, and his wife would return to Italy for the first time. And we're going back.
So I'm just going to fast forward to when I got Albert back to Italy and brought him to the cemetery, because in the same explosion that took Al's leg, his squad leader was killed. And for a long time, he only remembered his squad leader as Ray, because he had been evacuated off the battlefield and basically was programmed to forget the incident his whole life. So I'm just going to fast forward until to where that scene happens here. All right, so that's
After leaving the information center on the cemetery, we put Al and Rocco in some golf carts and began to bring them to a specific plot.
Are you all good? All good. See you in church.
Al only remembered his squad leader's name by his first name as Ray. As we approached this plot of graves, unbeknownst to Al, he was walking upon the gravesite of his squad leader. I wanted everyone to take a step back and give him some privacy because it was really just about to hit him. He had never seen a squad leader's grave before. He didn't know that I had located the squad leader's grave. All we had to go on was the first name of Ray. I researched every Ray that was buried in Rome National Cemetery, which was about, I believe, somewhere between 8 and 14 Raymonds or Rays. However, the dead giveaway was the day Ray was killed. It was the same day that Al lost his leg. And that Ray belonged to the same regiment, the same division, the same company, and it was Ray James from Kentucky.
It's something that hit me. I don't know. I didn't know him that well, but I knew him. And hey, he's gone. God bless him.
I'll never be able to tell you what Al was feeling at that moment. I wanted to give him his space. I told everyone that was on our trip to take a step back, and I could see Al talking to himself, like, as if, hey, sorry it's taking so long for me to come visit you, kind of deal. And as soon as Al began to lose his balance and get emotional, that's when I know I had to go over there and greet him. And the hug that Al gave me, I know he wasn't hugging me, he was hugging Ray.
He said, that barrage started, he says, let's hit the ground. He says, who knows where the shells are going to land. And we were there, and about the fifth shell of that barrage is what got us. Never heard it coming until it was too late. And then bingo. It hit Ray directly. Ray had his feet on my shoulder. We were head to foot or whatever. And he got 100% of the shell got to him. I got the outskirts of it, which was bad enough. But hey, it happened. And when we got to the cemetery, Andy had found out where he was, who he was. All we had to go by was his first name. I didn't know his last name. I didn't know where he was from or anything. That morning, he had just come back from rest area. Now, it was his last 4 hours on earth. He took the blood of my shell, which was a shell that dropped, they tell me, about a half a mile short of his target. So that was the end of it. I was fortunate. There was 3 guys pulling guard duty out there. They came down after the barrage was over. And we were in a riverbed that was dry with 4 German trucks out there all burned out. They scared me more when they came down around those trucks than getting hit. They saw what had happened. They loaded me on a Jeep and hooked me off to the hospital. So the time I got hit till I got to the hospital was an hour or less, which it was very fortunate. I laid on the hospital floor for 9 hours before I got to the operating room. I gave up 2 chances to 2 pilots that were injured worse. I I say worse than I was, so I always say things could be worse. You can always find somebody that's worse off than you are. And I got in the operating room around 9:30. And Major from Boston operated on me. And he said, "You're going home." That was it. Hey.
Yeah, so that wasn't emotional or anything when I did that, when I pulled that off. I basically looked up all of the Rays and Raymonds. I looked up, there we go. I looked up all the Rays and Raymonds in the Rome National Cemetery, and there was about 14 of them, I think, of the 3,000 men and women that are still buried in that hospital, and was able to narrow it down by Al's regiment, and then narrowed it down by the date that Al lost his leg. So I'm so happy to have done that. Al's still alive. He attended my book signing last week in Boston, or 2 weeks ago. And there was also another veteran on that trip, and he was annoying the hell out of me, I'm not afraid to say, on this trip. He served with the 85th Infantry Division, and he happened to live the town next to me. His name is Rocco. And Rocco, the whole trip, is dragging around this garbage bag full of black and white news articles and photos of, at the time, I'm like, God knows what. And I'm trying to convince him to leave these articles and leave these newspapers and pictures in the car. I'm like, we don't have to drag it around everywhere. Well, stupid me, they came in handy because we went into a village and the elderly people began to point themselves out in those photos that I was torturing him for. So I'm going to fast forward to that clip of us in the village of Tremensoli.
Tell you.
Hey, as I say, I was lucky. I'm here today, which is more
Pestering me about visiting this village called Tremensoli. He had been carrying around these old photos, these old notes and documents the whole trip, and really wanted to visit the Polar Bear Monument of the 85th Division and try to find some ammo box he left back there in 1944. So we reached Tremensoli, which wasn't well known to our tour guides. You could barely squeeze vehicles through the roads and the buildings, but we found some locals kind of sitting on the corner smoking some cigarettes, and asked them if they had known where the 85th Division Monument was.
Well, Tremensoli was supposed to be a monument that we put up here in 1992. And it was a hard thing to take. This place was really fortified. And we have 2 boxes here. But, I don't know whether we're flying now. So, there's a restaurant at the top of the hill. This must be the restaurant. At the top of the hill. Let's go find out.
Ma forse deve
io so che stiamo parlando a questi. Yeah. So it's incredible. After 75 years, Rocco is showing some of his photographs, and people here is recognizing the other people on the photographs. It's just crazy. It's amazing.
Until the interpreter told us they were recognizing people in the photos who still live in the town today, including an old lady who was just around the corner. We started following these locals. We're pushing Rocco in the wheelchair at this rate. We go down this tiny little alley where they bang on this woman's door. Her 2 daughters come out. And then the other woman, who's 97 years old, comes to the door. And then Rocco and the women are starting to reminisce, they're starting to speak in Italian to each other, and most importantly, they're recognizing themselves in the photos that he took from the 40s and when he returned in the 70s.
1992.
E che sono riuscita! Mamma mia! Storica!
Stai parlando con che cristiani, conosce questo?
Sì!
This old lady was here. She's 96 years old. And she ended up talking about the war, fighting. That's incredible. It's just incredible. All of the pictures, right? All of a sudden, they all turn around. They all recognize practically 10 or 12 people, you know? So once, oh, wait a minute, she was here in 92. She's 97 years old. I says, is she married? No, far around here. I made her a promise.
This being said and become just as powerful as returning Al to see the grave of his squad leader. Here I was, looking at the faces and the expression and the voices of these locals and what it meant to have Rocco there. They were saying how historic this was and what a brilliant reunion it was to be there, since their village was destroyed in World War II. There were still bullet holes in the sides of the walls.
Well, that's it. You guys can turn the lights back on if you want. Yeah, so that is the little Italy story there. But, you know, okay, you got it. So, yeah, that's the story of my little journey to Italy. I also did this with a group of veterans back to Bastogne, Belgium, which is on YouTube. If you look up the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. But it's just amazing that this rifle is really responsible for all of that. It took me on a journey like no other. And, you know, I want younger veterans to be able to open up that book and see that they too can live a long, successful life after combat, after war, as these veterans all did that are now in their mid to late 90s. The oldest veteran on that rifle is 105. And he could tell me everything about being in the field artillery as if it was yesterday. So it's been a fantastic journey, and I'm going to open up to any questions, of course. My book is available on Amazon too, so if you have friends or families that might want to get their own copy after today, you can forward them to Amazon for sure. But I can't thank Mike McCarthy and everyone else that has been amazing to me on my first out-of-state kind of book signing and book promotion and sharing my journey with the people here in North Carolina. And that museum that I went to, the Veterans History Museum of the Carolinas, is just, it's so spectacular and unique. And I'm so happy you guys have the volunteers to preserve that place, because it really is a time capsule that I walked through yesterday. So, anybody have any questions? Yes, sir, in the back with a mask.
Could you describe a little bit about the rifle, caliber, magazine capacity?
Sure, it's an M1 Grand rifle. That's the standard rifle of that time during World War II. General Patton referred to it as the weapon that won the war, because for the first time ever, we were basically issuing almost every infantryman a semi-automatic rifle that you put an 8-round clip in, and you don't have to reload it until those 8 rounds are gone. So the German and the Japanese soldiers had to, you know, use a bolt-action rifle and cock around in every single time, where you could be shooting that semi-automatic, bang, 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 and keep the enemy's head down and be able to move forward and back and forth through infantry tactics. That was very helpful for our guys overseas. It fires a 30-06 round, and it's very accurate. It's an excellent weapon. We used it all the way up into past Korea of just before Vietnam.
Was this the one that made a pinging sound when the last round went?
That's right. Yep. As soon as the last round was fired, the bandolier went up in the air and made that ping, the ping noise, the famous ping noise. Yes, sir.
Could you provide a little bit of a bio of yourself and your service?
Sure. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2006, and I really wanted to go right into the action. I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened, and I was explaining this. What's funny is like this story used to be just a basic story until like the last 48 hours, watching what's going on in Afghanistan. So now it's kind of like a different meaning. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, so, it's the first time I'm talking about Afghanistan since all this stuff going on. But, all right, get it together, Andrew. So, being in 8th grade and seeing people jump out of the Twin Towers and stuff, that's something that it really does rob your childhood a little bit. You want to help, you want to fast forward and wear the same uniform the World War II veterans did. And you want to serve your country. So in 2006, I went to boot camp. I joined the infantry. I served in Iraq in 2007 and 2008. And I came home from that, started to go to college, was in the reserves, and then went to Afghanistan until all of 2011, where I also served in the infantry, this time as a fire team leader. So I got out of the Marine Corps in New Year's Day 2012, came home, finished college, got my master's degree, and still actively serve as a police officer in Massachusetts for the last 9 years. So that's what I do now. So this book has been detrimental to me in my own journey, and I want to pass it on to so many younger veterans. So.
What did you learn from these veterans? You were telling me earlier you learned something.
It's a very complicated question. What I learned from the veterans, and even with the controversy of Afghanistan, I mean, these guys really did show me that war isn't always black and white. During World War II, we had the big victory parades, and it was, and a lot of us are taught and programmed that it really was good versus evil, and it was so cut and dry. And talking to over 200 World War II veterans, they painted the picture to tell me that it really wasn't. It wasn't all just milkshake drinking and swing dancing and good versus evil. And I got to talk to a lot of World War II veterans who told me about them when they were just that scared 19-year-old kid and the things they did to reach victory and to win wars, especially the brute force that was used in the Pacific. And just the certain things that were done that we don't always read about in the headlines and stuff that would get today's troops in trouble or court-martialed or thrown in jail. A lot of that stuff was overlooked during World War II, and to be sitting in front of a World War II veteran of the greatest generation telling me about some of the not so great things that were done to win the war, it really brings a bonding and a humility factor to us to talk. And I thought that was great and fantastic that they're admitting to me the spoils of war and how it's not just black and white, and not every German soldier was a Nazi, and not everybody in the Pacific, vice versa, same thing. So I write a lot about it in my book, stuff that isn't always made for microphone and video. So yes, sir.
I want to say deja vu.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you just said and what you have been saying about being emotional after Afghanistan. I was in Vietnam for 3 years, at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I can tell you how you feel right now, because I feel it too. And that M1 grenade rifle, I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, I still remember the serial number, my first serial number. 181-8612 was right on that rifle.
Yep.
If you think about it, we didn't have CNN in World War II.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
That's
Or the media was really on your side no matter what. There was nothing you could do wrong. It didn't matter if we did drop millions of bombs on a city in Germany. Yeah, you know, and those, the veterans I met were absolutely openly admitted that and knew that. And then, you know, I talk a lot about the macabre that happened in the Pacific, between obviously the Japanese and what they inflicted. You know, we have a lady here who took care of prisoners of war from the Pacific. Okay, there's a reason why there's more alive POWs from the European theater today than there was in the Pacific theater, because they barely survived being a POW in the Pacific theater, if they survived. And then in return, our troops take out stuff on the Japanese soldiers, things you'll read about in my book, and stuff that simply is very you know, frowned upon today and would put a service member in prison. Yep.
Andy, tell us how much help you had in fundraising for some of the projects you did, which were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you needed help to do things like that. And what prompted the people to back you?
Sure. So the rifle itself, when I was just getting signatures on it, I really did pay that out of my own pocket. I traveled on my own pocket for years, because I believed in it wasn't just, hey, I'm going to write a book and hopefully make some money off of it. It was really a personal quest. But when I started to find World War II veterans who had never returned to, let's say, Italy or Belgium, you know, it took major fundraising efforts. And I used that motorcycle ride that you saw, that Boston's Wounded Vet Run, to help fundraise. When I brought 16 World War II veterans and one family member to the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, I raised about $75,000 just to do that trip. And we used every nickel of it. Because not only are we paying for the World War II veteran and a loved one, I needed to bring volunteers to help push wheelchairs, unload wheelchairs off coach buses, help an elderly man off a coach bus, and some of the children of the World War II veterans are almost 80 years old, you know? So we had to be helping multiple families. And I owe a lot of people help on those trips who stayed up with me, loading and unloading, you know, luggage and suitcases, and making sure someone doesn't have a food allergy, or just trying to squeeze them into these little restaurants and pubs over there in Europe. Someone else was, yep.
Andy, I don't know, we found out this morning through this first cab veterans site on Facebook that we lost a wonderful man who was a reporter, Joe Galloway.
Oh, he passed away? Oh man, what happened? Oh, he was just chirping on Facebook not too long ago. Yeah. That.
The first cab.
Yeah. If you've ever seen the movie We Were Soldiers, you know, the guy that portrays him is Barry Pepper with the camera. He's the one civilian photographing the Battle of Idrang Valley. So, wow. Yeah. Yep. I know of him, I absolutely do, yeah. I used to be friends with him on Facebook, yeah. Yes?
And will you explain to the audience how you selected from the 200 people that you've interviewed, how you selected the stories for your book?
Sure, so I want to tell all 200 stories. I met a lot of veterans who signed that rifle that had I met them too late. They were developing stages of dementia and just simply could not share their story the way they probably could 75 years ago. That was one big factor. A second big factor was I did want to tell stories and talk about divisions that you don't hear a lot about. A lot of books are written about, you know, the 101st Airborne jumping into Normandy or the flag raising on Iwo Jima, but you know, there was over 100 different infantry divisions that fought in World War II, and a lot of them are not shown by mainstream media, or we don't see a lot about the 87th Infantry Division, the 106th Infantry Division. We're not taught a lot about those particular units. And so when I'm finding survivors from those divisions, I realize that their story hasn't been told a lot. Because they weren't on D-Day +1, their story gets forgotten about because they got to the European theater in July and not June 6th. You don't hear their story. Or they got there in August. Or hell, they got there just for the Rhine River crossing into Germany. You don't hear their story because we really focus on these pivotal dates of, you know, June 6th or the flag raising on Iwo Jima or the dropping of the atomic bomb. So I really wanted to represent the whole war on that rifle, and I tried to as best I could. There's people on there from cooks to infantrymen to Medal of Honor recipients. Yes, sir.
Just as the museum helps preserve the history of combat so that civilians can understand what took place, you've done such an awesome job of telling in detail so people understand something beyond so-and-so went into such and such battle and he or she got wounded, they got medevac and they came home. They don't know beans about what is in between that, the human suffering, what it's like to serve, what it's like to go to basic training, any aspect. Civilians don't understand, and that's a part of history that you've helped preserve. God bless you for it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I feel like, and you're right, and that this rifle, it really acted like an instrument, a tool. You know, and when people hold it, they look at it. When I'm going through TSA at security and they pop the case open to see what the hell I'm carrying, they gather around and they take cell phone photos because they're being educated right there. Wherever that thing goes, people ask, what is the writing? Who are these people? So, yes.
Looks like you're running out of room on that rifle. Are you going to get another one?
He asked, it looks like I'm running out of room. Am I going to get another one? If I want to keep my wife and kids, I'm not going to get another rifle. This has been going on for 6 years. I've had 2 sons during it. I'm definitely at the end. You know, I'm on this book tour now, and I've been invited to do a book signing at the Utah Beach Museum in Normandy and the Bastogne War Museum in Belgium, and I'm hoping to get all these things done in this COVID world. And I want to bring veterans with me, because what better to have someone who's signed the rifle also signing your book. But I'm facing a tough time with the virus and trying to do that depending on which direction the virus is going in. And so I'm going to do what I can for the next year promoting the rifle and hopefully get it into many hands as possible. Yes.
When you start with your next rifle, would you let our museum take care of this rifle?
So, you know, it's funny, but in a way, you know, the whole point of doing this was to educate. So I do want this rifle to, maybe even if it's a traveling exhibit, it starts at one museum for a few months and then goes to another museum. And have it being like a rotating glass case, and it tells you the stories, or the book is available so you can read some of the stories of the men of the rifle and the women of the rifle.
Andy, tell about some of those states you visited to find these veterans.
Sure. I've been to every corner of the country: California, Oregon, Arizona, all over the East Coast. It's shown me so much, so towns and places I would have never seen or never known about, or known about that their sacrifice of going into, you know, Nitro, West Virginia, or, you know, Bend, Oregon, or, you know, just going to public housing in Brooklyn to find veterans still living there. You know, it really educated me on the background of everybody at every part of America that came together to win that war and fight in that war. I'll never forget, I got a phone call when he was alive. His name was Robert Maxwell. He got the Medal of Honor in France with the 3rd Infantry Division. He jumped on a grenade. And I had written him a letter saying, you know, I don't have any Medal of Honor recipients on this rifle, and I'd really like for you to add your name to it. And I sent a letter, and I think a couple months went by, and I got a voicemail saying, hey, this is Bob Maxwell. Hell, I'll sign your rifle if you come to Oregon. So I jumped on a plane and went to Oregon to meet at that time, which was the 3rd living World War II Medal of Honor recipient. Now we only have one, which is Herschel Woody Williams, who's 97, who was a flamethrower operator on Iwo Jima, who very nicely wrote the foreword in my book and signed my rifle. So there's 2 Medal of Honor recipients on that rifle. Navajo code talkers, Tuskegee Airmen, Navy men, pilots. We had our first P-47 pilot sign the rifle today, Ed. So So that's just another milestone of representing World War II. And it's to try to get the whole war represented on there. We have Merrill's Marauders who fought in Burma on there. We have Marines who fought on all the different islands. Veterans replacements who were just thrown in during the Battle of the Bulge, had their 6 weeks of basic training, and then now they're in the biggest ground battle ever fought on Earth.
There's an interesting story in your book about going to Atlanta.
Yes. This happened multiple times. I'll reach out to a veteran who's in another state, across the country, and I find out, oh boy, you were with the 10th Armored Division during the Battle of the Bulge in Bastogne before the 101st Airborne got there. I need to hear your story. He's, sure, you're invited. Come fly to Sedona, Arizona. Come fly to Atlanta, Georgia. And I get there, and it's not until I get to their front porch that they tell me that they got frostbite the first night and they were evacuated. Something they could have mentioned on the phone. So that happened to me twice, but I said, hey, I'm in Atlanta. This guy could have lied to me and said he got the Silver Star and he killed 100 Germans and all this stuff, and I probably would have ate it all up. But he was honest, and so I'm leaving the gentleman's house. One of the fastest meetings I ever had with a veteran. Only could talk about so much after his one day of World War II. I looked at the local newspaper in the newspaper stand, and it says, veteran skydives for 94th birthday. And I said, who the heck is this guy? And I look him up, and it's Stanley. His name is Stanley Sassine, and he was from Sandy Springs, Georgia, which isn't far from Atlanta. And so I looked him up in the Yellow Pages, found that he was living at a local, a local assisted living care center. And I go in there with the rifle in its case, and the lady's at the front desk looking at me, and she's asking me what's in the case, and I don't know why, but I just kind of say it's a violin, like I was there to play music for the elderly veterans here, Why would I go in there and say I have a rifle? And I'm like, I'm here for Mr. Stanley Sassine. We have an interview set up, and I think I think I used the violin another time, but this one, she just probably assumed it was a camera and a tripod in the case, because I told her I was there to interview Mr. Stanley Sassine. So I take the elevator upstairs, I go upstairs, and he's holding court, basically in the little chow hall they have up there. And he has his little beret on with his Merrill Marauders and his Ranger tab, and I said, hey, will you sign my rifle? And he said, absolutely. I told him a little bit about the rifle, and I said, well, I'll meet you back at your apartment, because we were in the cafeteria. And I get to his apartment, and I open the door, and he's pointing a Japanese Arisaka at me. He's like, this came off the bastard who shot me, and he had a Japanese sniper rifle from when he was wounded fighting for the Michinal Airport in Burma. So, yes, ma'am. Yeah, I was asked that earlier. I've been, when I was in Belgium, I got to talk in front of 200 Belgian kids to talk about the World War II veterans who signed the rifle, and that was fantastic because they view World War II veterans as just gods over there, because they're taught at a very young age that these are the men who liberated you and freed you. And so I got to speak in front of them, and I have a lot of different school things being worked out, but it's hard to bring a firearm into a school, so. But I have a lot of talks lined up just like this as well, but I have been emailed by multiple teachers and professors who have ordered books for their whole classes, so. I sold 10,000 books in 15 days. Yep. So we've been sold out for 2 months, so I've stayed at that 10,000 number because the printing and the publisher couldn't keep up. So now they're back available, luckily.
You have your first Merchant Marine.
Yeah, that's right. I do. Mr. Wilmington was the first Merchant Marine to sign my rifle today as well. I mean, there was a lot of firsts, so. There was a lot of firsts here today, so it was spectacular.
Well, We want to thank Andrew. He came all the way from Massachusetts just for us. When I asked him, I said, we're the little museum who could.